picking up right where we left off in the last video. And for those of you who didn't see the last video, it's all about wrestling gimmicks. And if you didn't see that video, I'll leave the link in the description below. Okay, but this isn't like, I don't think there's a long description necessary to kind of explain what we're doing here. It's a tier list, and we're talking about pro wrestling gimmicks. It just for a little bit of further clarity, so we're not talking about, the in-ring ability of a particular individual, right? So Mark Calloway's ability to work as The Undertaker doesn't really have much of anything at all to do with how we're ranking The Undertaker. The way this works is we're talking about the gimmick, and we're talking about what that individual was able to do with that gimmick. So it's not necessarily a matter of what's super corny or what's fucking ultra cool or whatever. You could have a corny gimmick and you get the right guy in front of that gimmick, maybe you can do a lot with it. Although, for instance, guys like Max Moon, the gobbledygooker and stuff, they're always going to be ass blast no matter how good the individual portraying that character is. Okay, and so again, speaking of the tiers, we got everything from ass blast all the way up to apex. Not a great deal of description required. Again, I'm having faith that most of you out there have an IQ of at least room temperature. You don't need much more than that to kind of follow along here. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. First up on the list, Buff Bagwell. Now, Marcus Alexander Bagwell, that's the dude. I remember when he debuted in WCW, and he was just some generic fucking dude, whatever. Not much to talk about there. He's just some fucking charming Southern guy, and I don't know how much he did. Back in those days when he first debuted in WCW, I was more of a WWF guy. Okay, we're talking about the early '90s here, long before the Monday Night War era began, long before his tenure with the NWO. But when it came to the NWO, we had, no longer was there a Marcus Alexander Bagwell, it was Buff Bagwell. And he was basically just the sidekick to Scott Steiner, as far as I can remember. Maybe he was doing shit before that, I don't fucking remember it. All I ever remember is he's the goofball that was kind of dancing around and flexing behind Scott Steiner. He was basically his escort manager, sometimes tag team partner. Yes, he'd get into some scraps and he was booked in matches and that, but he was really just a glorified cheerleader, okay? And so he always bothered me, okay? I never was a Buff Bagwell fan. I always thought the hat looked stupid. The gimmick was kind of fucking lame. All right, he's buff, but you know what? So are a lot of the other pro wrestlers. And you are standing next to the buffest of all of them. I talked about it in the last video. There was nobody more jacked than Scott Steiner. So you're this guy's fucking little sidekick or whatever, right? You're the Robin to his Batman. And your whole fucking gimmick is that you're buff, and you're the sidekick to the buffest guy in the fucking business. So, honestly, I know there was some appreciation back in those days for Buff Bagwell. A lot of people thought he was funny, humorous. I never got a kick out of that character. And again, because of the contrast, in terms of his physique, not to knock his physique. Buff Bagwell definitely had a good build. Although later in life, not that it should count really against the guy, but he wound up fucking himself up, getting calf implants because he was so obsessed with, having the perfect body, could never quite get to where he wanted to be, and he decided to inject some fucking fake muscles into his legs, put him in a wheelchair for a while, kind of fucked his whole life up. Anyway, that character sucks. That's ass blast. So we're off to a bad start already, but let's see. Maybe we can move up from here. Next up on the list, the African Dream, Akeem. For those of you who remember the Twin Towers, the team back in the 80s of the Big Boss Man and the African Dream, Akeem. I don't know. It was part of the Heenan family. This is the one-man gang, okay? And that's a whole other character we're not going to get into. Maybe in a future installment of this series, we'll get into the one-man gang. That's not what we're talking about here. But for the most part, it's the same fucking character. I don't remember the guy's actual fucking birth name, okay? I just remember him as the one-man gang, and I remember as the African Dream, Akeem. And It's the fucking same character. They just threw a different label on him, threw some different colors on him, made him look like a fucking goofball. I don't know what that African garb he was wearing, why they decided to call him is he like Dave Matthews, right? Like he's actually from Africa, like from South Africa where the white people lived or something? I don't know. The African Dream, he had the fucking map of the continent on his back. And I don't know. To me, the African Dream should have been like, I don't know, Ron Simmons. Okay, Mark, that should be a black guy. All right, not to get into the whole racial thing, but I think we all can agree there. The African Dream, Akeem, that was kind of a stupid character. I never really quite understood the dynamic between him and the big boss man, other than they were both big fat guys. Ass blast. Fuck it, man. That's where we're starting this shit, I guess. All right, next up, Nails. Fucking ex-convict. This is another one where I don't know the guy's actual name. I didn't bother to research it for this video. Big dude, I don't know, stood about 6'7", 6'8", maybe 300 pounds, something like that. Very, very scary looking dude. Intimidating. And I remember, I think he was brought in back in the early 90s, when shortly after The Undertaker turned face, they needed a rival for him. They needed somebody scary enough, somebody big enough to pose a legit threat to The Undertaker, somebody for him to feud with. And I don't know if there was some kind of backstory maybe between him and the big boss man. I can't quite recall, but it sounds right. But yeah, so nevertheless, this was a fucking kind of a scary looking character. He had the prison garb going, and fucking ugly fucking looking motherfucker. And he wasn't like super jacked, right? Like he didn't look like he was like some Adonis or anything like that, but he was a big, strong looking dude. He looked mean as hell. His moveset seemed to kind of speak well to his gimmick. I think Nails, it wasn't a super long-lived gimmick, but it worked well. Okay, it suited that wrestler. And I think if I'm not mistaken, he got fired because there was some kind of dispute between him and Vince McMahon, and he went in and I don't know, did he like beat the shit out of McMahon or fucking threaten his life or something like that, and he got his ass fired. But that's neither here nor there. It doesn't impact the character. It was short-lived, yes, but the fucking character worked. Doesn't belong anywhere near Apex. Maybe not even badass, but we're gonna put that as a W. We're gonna put that as that's a win. That's a good character. It fit the guy playing him. Next up, the eighth wonder of the world, Andre the Giant. And what can you say about Andre the Giant? He before Hulk Hogan, before all these other guys that we're talking about, there was Andre the Giant. Andre's the guy who inspired guys like Hogan. Okay, it made him want to get into the business. And here was just this guy, back in the territory days, where it was kind of an unspoken rule, or maybe it was spoken. I don't remember. But here was a guy, and I don't remember what territory he was necessarily a part of, but he was basically like a freak show, right? Like here's this fucking gigantic individual. He drew crowds, huge. He was like the first superstar. I mean, you had your Bruno Sammartinos, Leapin' Larry, and all this fucking shit. But Andre was the first bona fide, world-renowned superstar, as far as I can recall. And again, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But what was his gimmick? Here's Andre Rousimov or whatever, but he's fucking 7 feet tall and he's like 500 pounds. His gimmick is he's a giant, and he was. I mean, you look at the size of this motherfucker compared to everybody else. I mean, and his status is legendary. The dude... Hold on. Did I fucking put him on the other tier list already? No, I didn't. I'm going back to the football thing. And I used him as a fucking... Okay, yes. Pardon me, I apologize. I thought maybe for a second that I had put him onto the previous tier list. No, I used him as like the avatar for the New York Giants NFL team. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked here. As far as a WWE, WWF pro wrestler, what the fuck? I mean, he's a giant. He's a legitimate fucking giant. The size of the dude's hands, his status as a fucking... The dude could take down like fucking 3 cases of beer in one sitting. He had to shit in a bathtub. He couldn't fit on a fucking airplane. The guy is just you know, again, eighth wonder of the world, right? And that fit him perfectly. And man, he's got to go down in history. I mean, we can talk about The Rock and Stone Cold and Hulk Hogan and all these guys, right? Nobody deserves it more than Andre. That legacy. He never had to change his gimmick from Andre the Giant to, you know, Andre the Giant fucking tax collector or something like that. And maybe we'll get to IRS somewhere down the line. But, you know, he never had to change you know, Andre the Dinosaur, Andre the stupid ass fucking Sasquatch or whatever. He was just Andre the Giant. Yeah, he was a baby face at times. He was a heel at times. But he was always Andre. Apex. You can't put him anywhere but Apex. All right? Next up, Psycho Sid. Now, Sid, as we all know him, you can just call him Sid. Sid Udy, his name by birth. And yeah, you know, he was in WCW as Sid Vicious. He initially debuted, I forget what was it, NWA or whatever the fuck, where he was like the Jason Voorhees mask. I forget what the name of that character was. That's beside the point, though. That's not who we're talking about here. We're not talking about that character. We're not talking about Sid Justice. We're not talking about Sid Vicious. We're talking about Psycho Sid. After he played the face version, right? Like, he was Sid Justice for a hot minute. He was Hogan's partner, and then he fucking went nuts, and he was Psycho Sid. And, you know, whatever. Then people talk shit about Sid. And he was corny. You know, he's got the infamous whole, I have half the brain that you do, you know, back and forth with Kevin Nash or whatever. But I'll tell you what, man. I'll tell you what. That dude had enthusiasm. You know, again, wasn't the best in-ring worker, although he wasn't as terrible as some people make him out to be. But that's beside the point anyway, because we're not talking about who the best worker is. The dude's presence. He looked like a bona fide psychopath. He was able to convey that gimmick so well. And standing as big as he was at a good fucking solid, I don't know, in real life, I think the dude's about 6'6". They listed him at about 6'8", 6'9", whatever. Big fucking intimidating dude. Fucking built like a brick shithouse. Okay? Looked like the living, walking, breathing, like Sabretooth. I always thought, like, if they, you know, and granted, they've made X-Men movies, but when I was a kid, I thought, man, if they ever make an X-Men movie, you know, they need to cast this dude as Sabretooth, because he would be so fucking perfect. And he would. I'd still argue that to this day. Of course, now he's like, you know, 1,000 years old or whatever. That ship has long sailed. But Psycho Sid, right? The theme music, the presence, the fucking promos, master and the ruler of the world, you know, all that shit. Badass. Fucking badass. I don't care what anybody says. All right. Certainly more badass than the next guy on the list. Duke the Dumpster Droese. A fucking garbage man. But I gotta be honest, I like that name. Duke the Dumpster. I remember, you know, oh fuck, I don't know if I want to talk about it. It's such a fucking conversation for one, but back in the day when I was in school, there was this girl that I would talk, she was a big woman, or well, girl, whatever, and that was the nickname that I gave her, you know, fucking the Dumpster. Anyway, whatever. No, nobody wants to hear that shit. Yeah, no, so this is not quite the same as, you know, Always Sunny's Trash Man, right? We're all familiar, I assume, with Danny DeVito's fucking, you know, the Trash Man, right? Like that. But this was the Trash Man. That was kind of his gimmick. Now, he didn't eat garbage. You know, he wasn't 4'10", you know, some fucking doughy 60-year-old or whatever. But whatever, that was his gimmick. He's a fucking garbage man. And I don't know, man, like, that's it. Like, I don't remember, like, him, like, throwing a garbage can over top of people and doing anything funny or cool. He was just a fucking garbage man. His name was Duke the Dumpster. And as much as I want to give him high points just for that name, that's fucking L, dude. That's L tier. That's a fucking shit gimmick. Okay? It's not an ass blast. I'm not going to put him down there. Yeah, and I know a lot of people, oh, fucking, come on, dude. Buff Bagwell's better than Duke the Dumpster. No, he's not. He's really fucking not. And I'm not going to fucking have this conversation right now. Next up, Ming. Now, dude, Tonga, Haku, Meng, whatever the fuck you want to call this guy is, we all know his status is legendary. He's the most feared human in the fucking whole industry, right? Like, if you could go online, you can look it up, you know, there's countless fucking testimonies as to if there's one guy you don't want to fuck with in real life, it's this guy. It's Tonga. It's Haku. It's Meng, right? You know, the fucking stories about him getting into bar fights, beating up like entire basketball teams, ripping off people's fucking, you know, biting off their noses, biting off their ears, ripping out their eyeballs, ripping out their teeth with his bare hands, beating the shit out of cops, busting out of handcuffs. You know, this, it's again, it's almost mythical. Like, I'll be honest, I am a little bit skeptical on some of these claims, right? But when you hear these claims made by so many of these fucking people, there's gotta, where there's smoke, there's fire. The guys, maybe he wouldn't beat like John Jones in a fight, right? Maybe Brock Lesnar would defeat him in the octagon, but where there's smoke, there's fire. Dude, there's gotta be some fucking legitimacy to it. And the character of Meng, not Haku, although they were very similar, you know, I feel like Meng, as he existed in WCW, it was, they kind of rolled with that whole, he's fucking crazy, a goddamn animal or whatever. Don't, you know, the only guy that, you know, was gonna beat him at the time, I think, was, you know, maybe like fucking Goldberg and, you know, the Giant, right? Those are like the only two guys that could topple him. And obviously Goldberg, he had that streak going or whatever. But it was very, very well fucking known and understood that in the storylines, you know, this is the most dangerous dude you could put somebody in the ring with. Right, and I remember fucking Ric Flair put his kid, because he wanted to teach him a lesson, threw him in there with Meng, and that was the whole idea. Like, Arn Anderson's freaking out, like, what the, you're going to put him in there with Meng? He's going to kill him. And Ric Flair said, yeah, oh yeah, he's going to hurt him. Yeah. Fucking, man, you just, how can you not put that in the Apex? I don't care. You know, no. Is he Hulk Hogan? No, he's not Stone Cold. I'm still putting him in Apex just because people still talk about Tonga today, and they talk about him for a very, very specific reason, which that character embodied to the fullest. That's fucking Apex. All right? I don't think I should get so many fucking arguments there. Anyway, next up, the Shockmaster. I could have went with Typhoon. I could have fucking went with Tugboat. And maybe I will someday down the line, but how could I avoid the Shockmaster? Just, look, we're not going to talk about it all that much, okay? There's not a whole, just go, if you don't know who the Shockmaster is, just look it up on YouTube. And I don't want to spoil it for anyone who's not familiar. Just fucking look it up. Right, and going back to Sid for just a brief second, I will say that's another thing, a feather for Sid to put in his cap, because while everyone should have been laughing their dicks off, right, that whole thing where this dude just busting through the wall, falling onto his face, he's got this retarded fucking sparkly stormtrooper mask, his fat guts sticking out, everybody should have just fucking been pissing themselves with laughter, and Sid stayed in character the entire time and acted like it was just like an Oscar moment, and he fucking kind of, did he save the show? No, but he tried, man. What heart by Sid. But anyway, we're not talking about Sid anymore, we're talking about the Shockmaster. Well, oh, I don't know. I mean, you know he's got to go to Ass Blast, right? It's got to go. I don't know. Did he ever have a match? I don't know if he ever did. He's got to go to Ass Blast, right? I'm tempted to put him in the Apex just as a fucking goof, but no, it's Ass Blast. But where would we be without Shockmaster? I mean, he added so much fucking joy to the world of pro wrestling fandom. Anyway, next up, Big Van Vader. The fucking entrance, okay? Back in the, you know, I mean, depending on how long you've been following pro wrestling, you know, of course, if you're familiar with him when he came, only by his WWF days, I don't know, did he come out with like the whole Mastodon fucking get up and like the smoke and steam coming out? I don't remember if he did by the time he came over to WWF. Maybe he did, maybe initially, but, you know, he kind of ditched it after a while, but nevertheless, it didn't, it just, that entrance, the whole Mastodon thing, you know, where he's got the steam coming out, he's got that big metal helmet, and it looked fucking cool. Huge, intimidating dude. Leon White, fucking one of the stiffest fucking workers out there. A lot of people got a lot of bad shit to say about the dude, but I don't know, whatever. I mean, I don't know, not ranking the dude based on his, you know, personal character or anything, although he seemed like a pretty cool guy to me. The gimmick that, you know, just like aside from the Mastodon, like, you know, helmet and all that with the smoke coming out of it, you know, the mask was iconic. Fucking what an agile big man. Again, you know, we're not rating these guys on the in-ring ability, but, you know, I don't know what you would call that gimmick, but like the whole it's Vader time, you know, putting his hands into the V, he had his own thing going. And, you know, he earned himself a lot of fans over the years, so there was kind of that forced face turn, kind of, especially, I believe, toward the end of his career. I mean, I was always kind of pulling for the guy. You know, as far as gimmicks, no. Was he a fucking garbage man? Was he a dentist? Was he a race car driver? No, he was none of those things. But again, like I talked about, what was The Rock? What was Stone Cold? What was Hulk Hogan? You know, they didn't have these silly gimmicks, these real forced, you know, corny cartoon fucking gimmicks. I mean, they had their own identity, though, and Vader is right up there with those guys. Now, I don't know if I want to say apex level, but certainly badass. Right up there with Sid. All right. Lex Luger, as in the narcissist. Lex Luger, not the American hero that was supposed to pick up the torch from Hogan, not, you know, as he existed in WCW or anything, but this is like the most forced gimmick they gave this guy, okay? He was brought into the WWF as a rival. I think it was when Mr. Perfect and Bobby Heenan had kind of parted ways, and Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect, he was making his face turn, kind of becoming a good guy, and, you know, Heenan had wanted to replace him because Mr. Perfect's whole thing was, I'm perfect, right? Obviously. And now here comes this guy who's got a much better physique. This is actual perfection, right? This narcissist. This guy, he comes out, he's got a mirror, he's got these like glittery fucking frills on his white shorts and stuff, whatever. I don't know. And don't get me wrong, Lex, you know, fucking like the top 10 fucking wrestling physiques of all time, for sure. Fucking dude had a fucking great body on him and all that, but I don't know. Again, I mean, I guess I gotta go back to that era, you know, those early 90s when that character was debuted, and think about, like, out of all the wrestlers back then, how many guys had a physique like that? Of course, there was the Ultimate Warrior, but there wasn't like a ton of, you know, Kerry Von Erich. There were plenty of guys out there that had equally as impressive physiques, but, you know, that was kind of Lex's gimmick. So it made sense to kind of make him like this, you know, self-obsessed fucking guy, you know, staring in front, you know, at the mirror all day. Was it very interesting? No. I don't know. You know, Lex, kind of a legendary figure in the world of pro wrestling, but that character, I'm putting in the nah. It didn't last long. I think the WWF kind of thought better of it, realized that this dude kind of worked better as a face anyway, so they did right by getting rid of that gimmick. All right, next up, speaking of physiques, it's pretty bad when you got to airbrush said physique onto some fucking spandex to make yourself look ripped, and then put like fucking, I don't know, gorilla fur on the rest of it to make you look like a giant 8-foot caveman, which is exactly what fucking Giant Gonzalez had. Now, we talked about Andre the Giant already, and yeah, Gonzalez, considerably taller. Very physically imposing in terms of just his fucking stature. I mean, they brought him in to immediately feud with The Undertaker, who at the time was one of the bigger guys. You know, he was one of the big men of the company. And one of the cool things to see, if I'm going to give him any credit, is just the fact that, you know, this guy stood like a full head taller than The Undertaker. Made The Undertaker, Mark Calloway, you know, who legit stood at about, with his boots on, probably stood at a legit 6'9", 6'10". And here's this guy towering way over him. and I know I said this is not, I keep repeating it. It's not about your in-ring ability. Thank God for him it's not, because if that was the case, we'd already have him an ass blast and we'd be moving on. But this is about the gimmick. He's a giant. Well, we already had Andre as a giant, and Andre had way more charisma. Took that character way further, and when all things are even, I guess I will say that's where maybe if it's a tiebreaker situation, where I'm talking about something like this, where there's two guys with a very, very similar gimmick, which one was able to do more with it? Which one was more iconic? Which one made it last longer, and who had the better in-ring ability? Because your in-ring ability does kind of at least work to a small degree to kind of further that gimmick, right? And, Gonzalez, what could he do? He could wrap his fucking giant hands around your throat and clumsily move around the ring. And the character didn't last too long, because he just fucking sucked. I'm going to put that in L. I'm not going to put it in ass blast, although, if the mood caught me right, I could easily put him there. But the fact that, I don't know, man, that fucking outfit was so dumb. That was so dumb. Whatever. He's a Bigfoot Sasquatch type thing. He's almost 8 feet tall in real life, so whatever. I'll let him stay with the L. Anyway, Jake the Snake Roberts. Now, this is an icon. To me, when you talk about like the golden era of wrestling, outside of Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage, maybe the Ultimate Warrior, Jake the Snake's right in that conversation too. Right? Andre the Giant. The biggest names that the sport has ever seen. Jake is only second to these guys. And, maybe I'll give him a couple bonus points for kind of helping launch the career of Stone Cold, although it's kind of indirectly. They had a feud, and, Jake was trying to be this Bible-thumping dude at the time, some born-again Christian, and that's where the whole Austin 3:16 came from, so whatever. Does Jake deserve points for that? I don't know. Probably not. But anyway, that was at a point in his career where it was toward the end for him. I think most of us, we remember Jake as, he spent a long time as a face. He spent a long time as a heel. He was good at both. But he cut some real good promos. He always had fucking Damien with him or whatever. I don't know. I think when he turned heel, he started carrying a cobra around rather than the python or whatever. But always, it was a good gimmick for him. Right, because again, he wasn't the most physically imposing. He's a big guy, right? He's probably 6'4", 6'5", something like that. But he wasn't like this Mr. Muscles, like a lot of the guys at the time. He relied more on his intimidation through his, the way he spoke, and he spoke real softly and had this fucking big snake that he'd bring into the ring, and he would use it to intimidate guys like Andre and Earthquake and whomever, right? So it definitely, and who's like Jake the Snake, right? Like there was nobody else that fucking would ever dare pick up that gimmick. So fuck, dude, Jake the Snake, that's badass. Gotta go up there with the badass. Man, really bordering on Apex, but I'm just not quite ready to put him up there with the likes of Andre. All right, next up, Roddy Piper. We got some good ones now, guys. Roddy Piper, another icon of the sport, going all the way back to the 80s. His whole thing was he's some fucking, Scottish bagpipe player or whatever. He's Roddy Piper. Now, I think I remember him playing the bagpipes on occasion. He knew how, and that's probably where the whole, gimmick of him being from fucking Glasgow, Scotland came from. But the dude never fucking spoke with anything but a Canadian accent, right? I don't know if he had any actual Scottish heritage or not, but the dude's from Saskatchewan or some shit. Nevertheless, he was rowdy. He fucking played that character real well. He was great as a heel. He was great as a face. He fucking, he had a real good career. And again, one of the icons of the sport, back in those days. I always kind of go back to like the rock and wrestling, Hogan, Macho Man, Roddy Piper, Andre the Giant. He's right there with all these legends. Piper's Pit, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that was like one of the first little segments that they would have on Saturday mornings and whatnot. There was the barbershop with Brutus Beefcake. Brother Love had his thing. Piper's Pit was one of those, he would interview other wrestlers, talk about the feuds and whatnot or whatever. Good rival to Hulk Hogan when they needed him to be. And he never really changed. I mean, that gimmick stuck. How much of it was a gimmick? How much of it was just this dude's legit personality? I don't know. But, I mean, that's, again, we talk about Hogan or Jake the Snake and Andre. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't these, like, super forced gimmicks. It was the best gimmicks oftentimes are, like I said in the last video, an extension of one's personality. He's a caricature of himself. Maybe he's probably got as much Scottish blood in him as I do. But he took that heritage, his knowledge of the background. Yeah, that'll be my fucking thing. But they didn't make that the ultimate focus. They made his, the rowdy part was the focus, right? And I think that fucking worked. And look at the dude's career. He went from the 80s all the way up to basically almost just before he died. The dude had a real long career. I'm going to put him a notch above Jake. I'm going to put him in Apex. Macho Man Randy Savage. Man, another one. And I don't want to sound like a fucking broken record here. I glossed over Hogan real quick in the last video because I kind of spent some time talking about him when I was talking about Stone Cold, because Stone Cold to me was the guy who picked up the torch that Hulk Hogan passed on. The Hogan era was done, the 80s, early 90s, they were gone, and then it was the Attitude Era, and Stone Cold picked up the torch from Hulk Hogan. To me, the way I see it, Macho Man Randy Savage is to Hulk Hogan as The Rock is to Stone Cold. Maybe to a lesser degree, because kind of The Rock and Stone Cold over time kind of became equals. They became, and obviously nowadays Hollywood is, seeing The Rock shoot into like this level that even Steve Austin has never achieved, right? So I would say that over time, The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin in terms of professional wrestling are more or less equals and were viewed as such during the Attitude Era. I would never really quite say that Macho Man ever quite managed to be Hogan's equal, but pretty fucking close. And what, again, I talk about making your own thing, and then it was the way he talked. Who else talked like this? The Macho Man Randy Savage. Ooh, yeah. Had his own fucking thing going. The cowboy hat, the ridiculous glasses, the fucking ridiculous fucking colorful outfits with the frills hanging off them. Apex, man. Apex all day. He was his own thing. All right, next up. Sting. We talked about Sting in the last video. We talked about the Crow version of Sting. And now we're talking about the 80s, early 90s Sting. The surfer Sting. Even though I never really understood where that whole surfer gimmick came from. I never saw any videos of him surfing or anything like that. But whatever. I guess, at the time, the dude had tan, bleached blonde hair, spiked. I don't know, whatever. The fucking original incarnation of Sting. Okay, as when he was the guy, right, in WCW, he was their superhero, right? Yeah, WCW was turd league in contrast to WWF at the time, but Sting was their brightest shining star. It was Sting, it was Ric Flair, it was Lex Luger. You had your bona fide stars, and Sting was the top of the heap, okay? Now, Ric Flair had a long career before Sting, spoiler alert, we'll get to Ric Flair in a bit, but Sting was the hero. He was the guy that the fans all rooted for. He had a unique look. Yes, of course, everyone was drawing and can still draw similarities between Sting and the Ultimate Warrior in terms of their fucking, kind of their gimmick, their real amped up, and he had the similar face paint and all that. So there were definitely some similarities, but when it came to the guy's ability to speak, when it came to the guy's ability to actually work, and again, broken record, yeah, that's not necessarily part of the criteria is your ability to work, but man, I mean, he was right there with them, in my opinion, right? You know, they split up as the Blade Runners. They each went their own way. I'll tell you, obviously, Sting knew when to evolve and kind of ditch the whole surfer angle, where Warrior never really knew how to let that original gimmick go, and he suffered for it. So I guess, you know, you could say, while the Surfer Sting character didn't have the longevity in terms of just like time that the Warrior did, he knew when to bow out gracefully, right? It's just like you never want to see, like Joe Louis fucking stuck around way too long, started getting brained by guys who he'd have killed, you know, years ago, but he didn't know when to hang it up. Chuck Liddell didn't know when to hang it up, and the UFC started, you know, you don't want to see that. Right? And so Sting knew when to bury that gimmick. Right? So that gimmick got put to rest in a way where it's like the memories you have of it are all positive, right? And he never overstayed his welcome. And I know that's something that I never really gave credit to any of the other characters for up to this point, but I think that's something worth considering. And what an iconic look. I gave him the badass last time, only because it was a direct lift of the Crow. And let's be honest, I mean, that's what it was. Again, I said it in the last video, he did a lot with that character, made that gimmick last a long time, but it was still just, it was the Crow. Well, this was his own fucking thing. And it didn't have the longevity that the Crow Sting did, but it was very much, you know, more a unique thing to Steve Borden. I gotta do him the solid and put him in Apex. Okay, especially considering, again, he was the guy in that promotion at that time, top guy. So much respect to original Sting. Next up, Papa Shango. Now, I talked in the last video about The Undertaker and being one of the scariest. You know, when I was like a 10-year-old, you know, and I saw him come out and debuted at the Survivor Series. Ooh, that's freaky, right? I mean, the guy didn't give me nightmares or anything like that. But it was, you know, it was a little chilling to watch as a little kid back then. Papa Shango, same thing, man. This dude was freaky looking, right? And again, this is another character. He was lifted from, I forget what fucking movie. What was it? James Bond movie where there's some fucking voodoo wizard or something, and that's basically what Papa Shango was. Okay? So just like Sting lifted the Crow, just like there are plenty of characters lifted out of Hollywood, out of the movies, Papa Shango was no different. But it was news to me. I didn't see that fucking movie when I was a kid. All right, now, again, I'm not a kid anymore. I'm fucking 44 years old, objectively looking back and rating these characters. But I think that character worked really well in the WWF at the time. In fact, I can't remember the guy's real name, but the Godfather, Papa Shango. Papa Shango was my favorite of all those gimmicks. Maybe it didn't have the longevity that the Godfather had, but to me, it stood out a little bit more. And this is a thing of personal taste, right? I liked Papa Shango. I'm going to put Papa Shango in badass. I thought that was bad. The whole smoking skull thing and the voodoo, all that. It was kind of a different angle of evil from The Undertaker. And hey, speaking of Papa Shango, the Godfather. He's next up. Same guy. Fuck, I really wish I feel like such an idiot, you know? I don't know the guy's real name. I can't remember. I know if like somebody told me right now, oh, it's such and such. Right. But whatever. I don't fucking remember. Right? I remember these characters. I don't necessarily remember the individuals that played them. Anyway, the Godfather, the Ho Train. Yeah. Big deal back in the Attitude Era. Now, and at the time, you know, the whole thing about the Attitude Era, about the Monday Night War era, was just trying to push the boundaries, push the limits. They started getting raunchy. They started really getting into that sexually graphic material. And here's the Godfather, right? He's a pimp. He's a pimp, and he brings out the hoe train, and everyone fucking loved it. I gotta be honest, I didn't love it. I just thought it seemed too forced. That whole Attitude Era. Like, you know, Stone Cold turning around and saying the word ass for the first time was kind of like, oh, what's this? That was kind of, it felt organic. It felt natural. It felt, oh, this is edgy. This is cool. But then, you know, once they started rolling with that and really trying to fucking, one-up WCW, right? Because you had the NWO and they're spray painting people and doing kind of bad stuff and being edgy. But Ted Turner, TBS, all that, they never wanted to go too far. There were certain lines they wouldn't cross. Well, McMahon, fucking no surprise, knowing what we know now, especially, didn't have any fucking problems crossing those lines. Flashing titties and fucking being just completely gratuitous, right? I didn't care for it. And it was at that point in time, not because I'm a prude, believe me, I mean, you listen to my mouth, I'm not a fucking prude. It just felt contrived and forced. I didn't like DX. I thought DX was kind of a fucking second-rate NWO. It was just too try-hard for me, and The Godfather was a representation of that. He was a colorful character. It lasted. It was iconic, and I try to put myself and look at this objectively. I know a lot of people would disagree that Papa Shango should be rated over The Godfather. Well, I'm sorry to say, it ain't going to happen. Not for me, because this is my opinion, but I'm trying to be fair. I don't want to put him in, like, Ass Blast or L or anything like that, because of, you know, he did have some longevity. It was kind of unique. I'll put it in the W. I'll put him right next to Nails. All right, as best I can do. All right, now we're going to get into a little more controversy here, because I know I'm going to get some pushback on this one too. Shawn Michaels, the sexy boy. Now, when he fucking kicked Marty Jannetty in the face and threw him through that fucking glass window at the barber shop, I thought that was awesome, because I never fucking liked Marty Jannetty. I don't know, he was just when it came to the Rockers, I was a fan of the Rockers. They were all right as a tag team, but like I always thought Shawn Michaels was the better of the two, right? I don't know why. I mean, when I was a little kid, I just thought Shawn Michaels seemed like, you know, he was better than Marty Jannetty. And, you know, whatever. They were kind of their gimmick was just so-so. You know, it was very generic, late 80s, early 90s. And so, you know, when Shawn Michaels came out with the leather jacket and he's kind of looking a little less colorful and, you know, that first turn, right? In the barbershop when he fucking turned on Marty. I was like, cool, sweet, this is awesome. I fucking liked it. I wanted to see him I kind of was anticipating as a kid him being like the first Stone Cold, right? Like that, having that kind of, you know, morphing into that kind of gimmick. Like, I don't give a fuck. But no, he kind of just turned the flamboyance just went up a notch. And then he came out to some fucking stupid song about him being sexy and doing the sexy dance and muscle poses when he really didn't have all that much muscle. And I mean, again, I'm not going to take anything away from the guy's in-ring ability, because if that's the case, he's right up there in Apex. But as a character, I never, HBK, Heartbreak, I just never liked it. I never liked it. Again, I understand a lot of people are probably fucking booing, giving the video a thumbs down at this point, but fuck him. I never liked him. I still don't like him. But I gotta be fair. I can't put it in Ass Blast, even though I want to. Man, I don't know what to do. As a gimmick, I'm just a sexy boy. Nah. Sorry, nah. I ain't fucking doing it. All right, Ric Flair. We talked about Sting a little while ago. Ric Flair, he was the other guy in WCW, top of the heap. You know, they had a rivalry that fucking, I don't know how many years did that last, but whatever. Do I need to talk all that much about Ric Flair? I mean, this guy he's been around forever, right? Legendary status, the nature boy, the jet flying, limousine riding, all that shit. Woo! Fuck, dude. I mean, you can say what you want about the guy personally. Maybe he's a shitbag just like McMahon and all that. Whatever, I'm sure he is. I have little doubt about that. But, man, the guy's mic skills, the entrance, the music, the way he... again, this is one of those cases where it's a perfect example of where in-ring ability does come into play, because his moveset, again, was an extension of that gimmick, the way he could flop and chop and do all the things that he did that just fit that character so well. And, do I really need to say a whole lot more about the Nature Boy, Ric Flair? He was never my favorite. Don't get me wrong. I laughed my ass off at him. I thought his best years were when he kind of took over WCW. During the Monday Night Wars era, he's like freaking out, elbow drop in the middle of the ring, like, throwing his shoes into the crowd and shit, freaking out, calling himself the President of the United States and that, having heart attacks in the ring and that. I thought it was great. Ric Flair's got to go to Apex, man. How am I going to not put Ric Flair in Apex? All right. Maybe it's anticlimactic. Last on the list, Crush. Kona Crush, specifically. Not Bryan Adams from Chronic, not Crush from Demolition, but Crush, fucking Shaka Bra. Crush is from Hawaii. I crush coconuts all day. And he was legit. I mean, the dude was from fucking Hawaii. That's where he was born. That's where he grew up. Big, strong, tough guy. Legitimately big, strong, tough guy. I think he started his career as a boxer. Definitely not somebody you want to fuck with. But the gimmick. He'd squeeze your head. And big and imposing. I don't know. I felt like Bryan Adams was more suited for the heel. I think he did well as a heel. Yeah, he was kind of the third wheel in Demolition. I wasn't too big on that, but it's not really his fault. I thought he did well in NWO. I don't know, but I guess, as far as probably his most iconic gimmick, most memorable gimmick, maybe right there with Demolition, or whatever, as he existed in Demolition, was the whole Kona Crush thing. And, he's all right. I mean, he's big. He's 300 plus pounds, probably like 6'7" or something like that. He looked like he could crush somebody. So that's going to go in the middle of the road. I'm not going to put that in nah. I'm going to put that in W. That's a win. They did right by Bryan Adams with the whole crush thing. But anyway, that's it. That's the list. I'm not going to elaborate a whole lot further. If you haven't seen the part 1, go ahead and check that out. Part 3 will be coming somewhere down the line. I don't know if it'll be the next video I upload, or if there will be something in the interim. That just all depends on how I feel. But in any case, thanks for hanging with me all this time. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video.